Hi, this is DarkFox127 and welcome to another Starfield Creation Kit tutorial video. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to create and manage your very own containers. So let's dive into it. To get started, I've gone ahead and loaded a test cell here, and I'm just going to go to the left-hand side under the object window, zoom in slightly there for you, and click on World Objects and Container. And when you click on this, you'll see that you get a huge list of all the containers in the game. And what I want to do is create a very special container of my own. So to do that, I need to select a container and make a duplicate. So I'm just going to right click on any of these, click on preview, and I can use the preview window here to determine which container I would like to use. So I've just found a nice one here. What I'm going to do is double click on that container. And the first thing I need to do is give it a unique ID. So I'm just going to wipe out the ID here, call it DF test container. And I'm going to change the name of it to Darks container. And then I'm going to cover some of these options in a moment. But first, to make sure I don't lose this container, I'm going to go and click OK. When I'm asked to create a new object or create a new form, I'm going to click on Yes. So that's going to make a complete copy of it. And when I go to the left-hand side here, back into the object window, I'm going to search for DF test, and it will filter down to show me my new container. I'm going to drag and drop that container into my cell. And then what I can do is position this wherever I like it. And another useful trick is to hit the M key to show the markers, and I can see where the front of the container is compared to the back of it. So I know that I'm putting it in the right place. So I'm just going to dump it here for funsies. And now I can double click on my container. It might disappear in the render window. That's completely normal. And then I can click on Edit Base to get back to making the changes that I want. So in here, I've got a number of options available to me. I've got my items list, which I will cover very shortly. But just down the left-hand side, we'll start with these different flags that you have. We've got random anim start. If this container had a fancy effect to it and it was glowing on a loop or anything like that, we could mix things up a little bit so that when you entered a cell and it first loaded, clicking this option would mean that it would start the animation at a random point, just so it's not too obvious that it's a looping animation. Obstacle ensures that this is cut out of any nav mesh, that's navigation mesh that allows NPCs to navigate around objects in the world. Ticking this option in theory, I haven't really tested it, but it should make a cutout so that people don't walk into this container out in the world. Respawn's a very common option that's used. Essentially, this means all of the items that are dumped in this container, do I want them to respawn after X number of days, or do I want them not to respawn so that it is essentially flagged as a safe container? So an example would be ticking the respawn option would be useful for people like merchants who need to refresh their stock, whereas unticking the respawn and having it as a safe container would mean that if I dump something in here and then come back to it later on in the game, it's not going to have disappeared, and any items that are initially put in here in this form list aren't going to reappear. Once they're gone, they're gone. So that's what the respawn flag means. Show owner, I don't believe that's used. It doesn't seem to have been used in the Skyrim or the Fallout 4 creation kit. I'm going to take a guess that that's the same situation here. Model is essentially the mesh that you're going to use. So if you were to click and edit this, you've got a number of options I won't be going into in this video, but you could click edit and you could select a completely different model. We won't be diving into that, but that's essentially how it's going to look in game. Add destruction data allows you to pretty much do as it says on the tin. You can make it explode, you can give it some health, you can have different effects on it once it disappears and things like that. We won't be diving into those specifics here though. Navmesh generation import option. This is also relating to Navmesh. I will link in the description down below the Fallout 4 creation kit wiki, as at the time of this video we don't have a wiki describing things about the Starfield creation kit, and that will go into detail about what these different options can do for you. Sounds, as you can see here, it's got a sound called ammo box open, it's got ammo box close, and it's got nothing for take all, but essentially you can assign different sounds to this for when the player interacts with it. Now, something very interesting to note here is that not every container, and even things like doors as well, are going to have sounds assigned to them. Now, this is sometimes because sounds can be assigned on the mesh itself. So on the model that you see here, it will sometimes have the sounds referenced there, and they're kind of hard coded into the mesh. So not everything's going to have a sound. So you'll really want to dive into game, play around with the container. If it doesn't have a sound, you're likely going to want to add some sound into here. Native terminal, this is to do with the user interface that you get when you interact with the container. If you're not aware of how to use terminals, not something I'll be covering in this video, but probably in the future, then I recommend keeping this to whatever it is from the container that you've gone ahead and copied. Contains only, I should say. This is a list of form lists which are sitting under the MISC section. Let me quickly show you on the left hand side. If we go under MISC and form lists, essentially what these are, I'll just clear out that filter as well. I click on one of these. They are a list of items a list, a form list. So a list of different items, and essentially you can select a form list here, and any of the items that are in that form list will be accepted into the container, and anything that are not in that form list will be rejected. So it might be quite handy if you've got a very small container that you want to make sure you can only add things like jewelry or credits into, rather than being able to stick a full-on massive weapon in there. You could go and restrict things by using this option here. If it remains as default and it's set to none, then it means it's free for all. You can put whatever you want into this container. It's not a problem. Item list, this is where the fun really begins. So here you can essentially start adding all of the items that you want to have in this container by default. And again, if respawn is ticked, it means that it will continuously make sure these items respawn and appear in here. And the way that you add items, you've got two ways. You can either drag and drop them from the object window on the left, or you can just do right click and new, and then you can start selecting your object in the drop down and just keep adding items. Now, obviously, doing it this way, this might get a little bit sluggish each time that you go to open this drop down. So I do recommend that you use the object filter here. Let's say that we type in something like carrot, and then when you click on here, you'll see that it filters down to specific objects, which is quite handy. So if I did right click and new again, it will start adding whatever's selected under object, which is carrot, and I'm just going to change the count. So this is how many do you want to see in here. I'm going to go for 10, and then I could clear the filter if I wanted as well, to start adding more items. Another type of item you can add in here, and this will be something in a separate video to go through the specifics of them, are something called a leveled list. So if you right click and new again, and you go under the object view, make sure your filter is clear, and you type in LL, you will start to dive into leveled lists. So what these are lists upon lists of items where it's essentially going to give you an item usually based on your level or a random group of items. So for example, if we were to select aid basic leveled here and then double click on the leveled list, give it a few seconds, it will open up and you will see all of the different items that you have a chance of getting from this list. Now again, I'm not going to be diving into leveled lists because that sort of sits outside of this video, but essentially that's what you can do. You can add leveled lists in as well as just standard items, and then it's going to start spitting out random items so that the containers are a little bit more mixed. So this is especially good for loot containers where you don't want to see the same thing spat out every single time. Now the other options that we have here are ownership. So you can make it so that some individual owns this chest, or you can make it that a faction owns the chest, whichever way around that you want to do it, and that is obviously going to end up marking this container in the game as stealing if you take items from it. Now the reason that you might want to choose a faction over a person is that the faction may make you wanted in an entire city for having stolen an item from that city, whereas an individual will probably just make that individual person pissed at you, and then also extend to their crime faction essentially also being pissed at you. So you can really choose whatever ownership you want depending on what you're looking for. Global variable I don't believe is used, and I'm not sure about required rank either, so we're going to skip past those. Now, especially when dealing with having leveled items in containers, something you may very well want to do is use the preview calculated results. So you can get an idea that if you were, let's say, level 8, just type in the level that you want, what kind of items are you going to get from this container with the current settings. And if we click on preview calculated results, as you can see, it's gone ahead and randomized and it's given us different objects. Now, if I go out of that and click it again, it's randomized yet again, which is quite cool. So it's really nice to see if your container's really responding and doing what you expect it to do before you jump into putting it into the world. Now, scripts, if you want to do fancy scripts and make really cool things happen with this particular container, you can go ahead and script it. I'm not going to be covering scripting in this video. That's a completely different kettle of fish, but you can add scripts to this if you wish. Now, because at the time of this video, we do not have the support of a full wiki covering the Starfield creation kit, I will not be covering the right-hand side section here, as I haven't really experimented around with it too much, and I've got to do a bit more work behind the scenes on that before I can really go into detail. So if I need to, I might make a follow-up video on what all of these options on the right here do. Otherwise, the only other thing to mention along the bottom here is that we have a snap template. This looks to be to do with display cases, so again, very much a separate video once I've figured out how this stuff kind of works, and I can show you how to use it. And you've got an option for display slots. This is very much for containers that are essentially acting as weapon holders, display cases. Otherwise, we can go ahead and when we're done, click OK. Click OK again. And then we will save this as a plugin, and we're now going to go ahead and dive into the game and see if we've got the items that we expected to see in our container. Okay, here we are in game, and as you can see, our container has appeared exactly where we expected it. And when I hover over it, it says Dark's container, and we've got a digipick, an injector, and 10 carrots. And I can go ahead, open that container up if I wish in the full menu, and see all the objects, and I can just go ahead and take all. And you can also see that the front to back was quite helpful because we've got the container opening the right direction. And that is it for another Starfield creation kit tutorial video, so I hope you found it useful. Please let me know in the comments section below as always, and if you're looking forward to more videos like this one and don't want to miss them, hit that like, subscribe and bell notification down the bottom there. Otherwise, thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you in the Starfield.